Hello and welcome to 2.5 Brains. This is our discussion of the latest episode of Survivor Season 44, Episode 2. You can break it all down, talk all about it. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. You can like our Facebook page, Pavement Road Prod on Facebook. Email the show directly, pavementroadproductions@gmail.com. Subscribe there. Share the post, tell your friends, or here on the YouTube channel as well. So a lot to go over here today. An episode of Survivor that happened. It was a fine episode. It was nothing too outrageous. But like I said, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. We're gonna go ahead and get this episode out for you here, right around the time of the third episode. So we got about a week behind, and now we should be caught up about a couple days after the third episode. We'll have our next show out. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. And like I said, you can like our Facebook page, and we'll get it out. And obviously, the plan going forward will be to get it out the day it airs, or at least the day after it airs, if we can. So, hopefully, like the format we did last week. I definitely like the new format a little bit, with getting a little more time. Giving about 30 seconds to each player, as opposed to all the time to the players who had a big impact on the season. Spending a little more time with each of the players, at least giving them a shout out per episode. So. As always, we're going to start with the 3 moments that mattered, talk about who did not survive and what they did wrong, and we'll go ahead and, of course, talk about who was the worst player of the week. Of course, I get 2 thumbs down. Who is how everybody else in the cast did, and of course, who are the 2 best players, or who was the best player, and they get 2 thumbs up. And I'll be keeping track of that as we go through as well. So, let's go ahead and dive on in here and start with the moment that mattered, number 1. And of course, that is birdcage paranoia. So the birdcage, obviously the idol was found on the Orange tribe. They found the idol. It was used and played, so a lot of them went back out to look for it again, see if they can find it re-hidden. We don't know how they're going to do that with it being re-hidden. If obviously with the birdcage idol, it was not put back in the birdcage, but again, we don't know. But the other 2 tribes were looking for the idol. They wanted to find it. So a lot of players saying, "I'm gonna go out look for firewood," and they go off on their own, and that means, of course, AKA I'm looking for idols. So a lot of people were looking. They decided let's all just go look. A bunch of different teams, pretty much all the tribes decided to go look for the idols. On the green team, it was fireman Danny who found the key, and then he had to wait and find a way to sneak over to the cage, open it, and he did open it. And he took everything out. And he took out the fake medallion that was the fake idol, the real idol, which I forgot. Actually, kind of forgot about that. When you find the medallion, or when you find the idol, there's actually a medallion in there as well. It's a fake idol that you can use for whatever you use it for. And then there's the actual idol in there as well. So he went ahead and put. So Danny found it. He opened the bird cage without my noticing, took the stuff out, and then tied the bag back up and put it back in the bird cage as it was before. So people were looking like, oh, it looks like everything's still the same there, nothing different. So obviously they'd be looking for a key that Danny has. I don't know what he did with it. I don't know if he had to, if he hid it in his pocket or whatever he did with it. Who knows? They didn't really go into that. But he did after he found it, he put the bird cage, put the bag with everything in it back in the bird cage and locked it back up. And I get, it's hard to tell, how much, lighter the bag looked, because they can't really feel it. But it looked pretty much like it was untouched. So Danny did a pretty good job on that. On the other hand, Carolyn was looking through, and she actually, the whole tribe was looking, couldn't really tell who was going to find it. Turned out that Carolyn found the key. And then when everybody else was away, she snuck off, opened the bird cage, took the idol out, put it in her pocket, everything like that, medallion, and I feel like she called the medallion the idol, and the idol the medallion, but regardless, she found that, and then she's like, okay, cool, good to go, and she's like, oh, wait, they're going to be back, and they're going to know I was the only one who was away from camp, so I must have found it. So she's like, hurried and scrambled and put it back in the cage, and locked it up, and went from there, but she didn't really tie the bag back right, or well, so people are like, oh, man, somebody must have found it, because it looks like it's been tampered with. Looks like the cage has been tampered with. So speculation ran rampant. I think Helen was accused. At least nobody was outwardly accused, but there was definitely speculation who could have had it. Yeah, Jam Jam was saying who he thought it was, and Sarah was saying who she thought it was. Helen was saying who she thought it was, and Carson said, he said he read everybody's body language and seemed like Helen was kind of closed off, so she was hiding something. So he thought that she actually found it. Ironically, nobody thought it was Carolyn, who's the one who was away from camp long enough to get it, which is strange. So I don't know why I guess they don't respect Carolyn as a player enough to think that she could have found it and whatever. But she was really the only one who had the opportunity to get it. So nobody really suspected that she had it. But obviously the paranoia ran rampant throughout the camp for the birdcage idol. Let's go ahead now and move on to moment matter number 2. Moment matter number 2 is budding romance, or I should say budding showmance. So we got teased on it last week, but 2 episodes so far, and Matt talked both times about how he's just getting out of a relationship, and he's, and then he got in more details about this week that, he was kind of the one who was broken up with, and he was feeling really good about the relationship, and all of a sudden it kind of ended, and he was really upset about it. And, and Franny and him have been hitting off really, really well. And he said in confessional how he really likes her. He definitely would ask her out, blah, blah, blah. And Franny said she has a good rapport with him as well, and they get together really well, and they have a good connection. Oh, that's great. Especially if this is a dating show, it'd be great. But of course, the problem is it's not a dating show, and Franny seems to have decent connections with most of the tribe, which is good for her. Matt, not as much. But everybody's saying, yeah, you're spending too much time together. And Franny even said we shouldn't spend so much time together because it looks like, we're going to be, people are going to think we're a pair, and that's not a good thing. And she even said that to some of the other people on the tribe. They're like, yeah, no kidding. And so it was kind of direct. Like, yeah, we know you're spending too much time together. You are spending too much time together. You got to stop that. And usually it ends badly for, the person in the showmance. Usually, Franny, being in the showmance, usually it doesn't end well for the woman in the showmance, because they get the guy for the strength, and they get her the woman. In this case, I think Franny actually has maybe the better connection, so maybe she would be the one who would stay, and Matt would go. But who really knows? Who knows? The showmance is definitely budding, and it's dangerous, and especially 44 seasons into the show. I know if you're single, I don't care. It doesn't matter. If you're a good rapport, you like hang out with each other, you like each other's company, fantastic. It's gonna blow up your game. It's gonna torpedo your game. You can't do it. You just can't. So we'll see how that turns out. But obviously the green team hasn't lost a tribal council yet, or anything. They haven't lost a immunity challenge yet. They almost did this week, but they held on for their sake, and so we'll see. But not a ton. Going on that tribe. The only thing really is going on is the showmance. So we'll see how that turns out for both of them. And moment that mattered number 3 is Carson in the middle. And so Carson, obviously this week got some good amount of airtime. They like to give this type of character airtime, which is good for them, I guess. But they talked about how the whole team talked about how Bruce might have been their strongest player, strongest physical competitor, and him getting hurt really messed things up. And so they don't really have a ton of physical strength. They have some intelligence, with Helen and with Carson, but they're not a really physical dominant tribe, so they've been losing a little bit, and that could be a problem for them going forward. So they did go ahead and lose this immunity challenge, and so then it was like, all right, well, Carolyn kind of seemed like the easy consensus vote. Nobody knew she had an idol, so that would have made things very very difficult, I should say, if they knew if she would have played her idol and whatever. But also nobody knew about Sarah lost her vote. When she got her advantage, her inheritance advantage, she lost her vote. So she wouldn't be voting in the tribal council. So it came down to, okay, if it's 3-1 on Carolyn, or 4-1 on Carolyn, or whatever, there's only 3 people only 4 people technically were able to vote. Carolyn wouldn't vote for herself, so the most it could be would be 3-1. 3-1 and anybody except for, if it was on Sarah, because she couldn't vote. So they start off like, okay, Helen, Carson, and Jam Jam were like, all right, let's just make it easy. We'll all vote for Carolyn. Good to go. Done. And all right, great. Good to go. And then as soon as they are done, Jam Jam runs over to Carolyn, tells her, hey, they want to vote for you, but I think we're going to, see what we can do. And they want to talk to Carson, bring in Carson. So Carson is in the middle between Helen and Sarah and Jam Jam and Carolyn. and you have to make the decision of which side he wants to go with, who he wants to vote with, and see what the answer ends up being. So, and Carolyn's of course freaking out and is nervous about it, and she's like, she doesn't want to tell anybody she has her idol and is going to keep it to herself, but she's thinking about maybe having to play it to save herself. Either way, if Jam Jam's not with them, it's and Sarah can't vote, it's at most 2-2, right? So it'd be Carolyn and Jam Jam voting against Helen or whoever, and then Helen and Carson vote against Carolyn. It's 2-2 because Sarah can't vote, and that would really mess things up. Best case scenario for Sarah is it's a unanimous vote and her vote doesn't get counted because they don't know she didn't vote because she didn't tell them she couldn't vote. But ultimately, it's it comes down to what will Carson do? Will Carson stick with the younger crew that she seems to like, or go with the older, weirder crew that he says he also relates to on that level as well? So that was really the swing vote, and that it also ultimately came down to what Carson decided to do. So who did not survive? Well, that's where we're answer right now, because Carson obviously made a decision, and as the votes came down, it was one vote for Carolyn, didn't need to play her idol, didn't play her idol, and 3 votes for Helen, and Helen gets voted out 3-1. Obviously, the votes were unanimous, so nobody necessarily knew that Sarah didn't vote because Jeff doesn't read all the votes when it's unanimous or when it's all on one person, except for themselves, obviously. So Helen gets voted out, third person voted out. She's been watching the show her whole life. Is really excited to be on the show, and now obviously she's the third person voted out because their one tribal council gets voted out, and very disappointed. What did she do wrong? Really hard to say. I mean, it's one of those things where she made a bond with Carson and Sarah, but obviously that wasn't that strong of a bond because Carson flipped over to the other side. I really don't know what she could have done differently. In a perfect world, Sarah has a vote. Sarah can vote with her, and then it's still 3-2, and they still lose. But maybe something's different in that case. As soon as it turned out that Sarah didn't have a vote, it was basically Sarah or Helen who's going to go home, barring anything else. Because even if it's a 2-2 tie, they go to rocks, whatever. I mean, it's maybe Helen's only option was to hope that they go to rocks, right? Because I mean, it's a 2-2 tie, and they go to rocks. Her and Carolyn wouldn't have to draw rocks, so the other 3 would be up against it. At that point, somebody's flipping. I would really believe at that point somebody's flipping. But I don't know. I don't really know why Carson went that way. I guess he felt more comfortable with it. I don't know which way Sarah would have voted if she had her vote. And if Carson's already gone, he's already voting that way. Maybe Sarah votes that way as well. But it didn't really seem like Helen had any real issues. But then again, Carolyn and Jam Jam were kind of saying, especially Carolyn was saying, that nobody else was really talking to her. Nobody else was really getting to know her, spending any time with her. And she's weird, so I understand that. But I think Helen's alliance was really, in her social game, really was just her alliance, right? So she enjoyed hanging out with Sarah, so she hung out with Sarah. She enjoyed hanging out with Carson, so she hung out with Carson. And Jam Jam was there as a necessity, but not really because she wanted him there, or they wanted him there. So he had no loyalty to them. He flipped over. Carolyn was the target, so obviously she's not going to go that way. And then it just came down to which way does Carson want to go? And when you have again 5 people in an alliance, or 5 people in a tribe, right? You're one of them, so there's 4 other people in the tribe. One's a target. One you're barely talking to. Then that means that you have to have the other 3 on your side. And if one flips or one isn't comfortable, well, now you're toast. And so I don't think Helen did anything egregious, but she really didn't manage her alliance very well. And I think that's why she lost and why she got voted out. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about each player in the cast, who did well, who did not. And Helen gets voted out this week, so we'll talk about her as well. Just briefly, how many, what points she was at, and everything like that, or how many pluses, minuses she had as we go through. But let's talk about who was the worst player this week, who had the worst week, and then we'll go ahead and talk about who had the best week this week as we continue on here. We'll go through, obviously, worst player of the week, everybody else, plus or minus, and then the best player of the week, and we'll wrap up with that. So, who was the bottom player this week? Let's talk about that. So the bottom player of the week this week is Sarah. I really wanted to give it to Matt because he's getting the showmance. He lost both his votes. I think he told that to, I think, Franny. They lost both his votes. And he's really got no social game outside of it. He seems a lot like Owen from last season. Like, even kind of looks like him a tiny bit. And he says everything's gone wrong so far. I'm like, yeah, just like Owen last year. Except Owen with a showmance in this case. But so I really want to give it to Matt. He's down 2 votes. Lost two of his votes, and next 2 tribals he can't vote, which is going to hurt. And thankfully his tribe's pretty strong in the challenges, so that's good. But if he goes with tribe swap or whatever, if they lose, something happens, he could be in some serious trouble. And again, being in a showmance is never a good thing ever. It never. I mean, sometimes it works out for them long term in the life, but never really good in the game. That being said, Sarah really messed up this week, and again, it's not really her fault because when they go on the journey, they have to choose to either risk their vote. They have to risk their vote. The only question is, do you choose to go again and get lucky, or do you choose to go again and not get lucky, or do you get the advantage on the first draw, right? So I mean, there's really no decision really to make, right? I mean, it's it's not like last time. I don't like this one as much because last time, they could make a decision to risk your vote or not risk your vote. In this case, they don't have a choice. At least it didn't appear that way. Maybe they do, but it didn't appear that way, that they had a choice to risk their vote or not. They had to risk it. And Sarah seemed to be very close with Helen, seemed to be very close with Carson, but somehow lost Carson to the other side, and then Helen gets voted out, and Sarah can do nothing about it because she didn't have a vote. So really rough week for Sarah. If they go to another tribal council, it seems like the writing on the wall for Sarah at this point. Who knows? Maybe Carolyn will be weird and they'll get rid of her, but she still has her idol. She just still held on to it. So it seems like Sarah is the one who's in trouble. And, they noticed when Maddie got voted out, there's a decent reaction. I feel like one of the women, maybe even Franny, really kind of rolled her eyes that a woman got voted out early. And now that another one got voted out, it's just it's continuing the steamroll. If they go back to tribal council, the purple team loses again because, again, they're not that strong. They're not that physically strong and not that great at the challenges as a group. The puzzles, and it's funny because, Matthew did a good job. He knew the puzzle, how to do it. He had practiced it before. He created it and practiced it. Carson does the same thing. He's used a lot of the Survivor puzzles that they've used before. He's practiced with them as well. So they come down to that. He's got a good shot. That being said, they're not, again, a great challenge team. They're really not a great challenge tribe. So lose again, Sarah could definitely be in big trouble. So we'll see how it goes for her, but definitely not in the best of spots. And that could be a problem for sure. So let's go ahead now and talk about everybody else in the cast. Obviously, we had the person who was in last place. So they're gonna get 2 thumbs down. We have the lowest player of the week. Then we have everybody else, and then we have the top player of the week. So three people are not out of the game. 3 people are voted out, and there's a top player and a bottom player, which are out of this ranking. So we'll have 13 more to talk about here as we go through. I try to spend a minute, 30 seconds with each at most. So I'll dive into that now. So let's go ahead and start off with Josh. So Josh, he had a plus last week. He was one of the people who had a couple confessionals. Seemed to be okay. Seemed pretty good in the challenges. Hadn't seen much from him. Still really haven't. Except he was in the hero role again for his tribe on the ball maze part of the challenge at the end. And he didn't do a great job. They seemed like they had a decent lead. And it seemed like he was doing okay. But it took him a while to get through. He fell a bunch of times. Seemed like he was losing his cool a little bit, getting a little bit flustered. And it was closer than it probably should have been, though he did eventually, complete the challenge, and they secured second place and didn't have to go to tribal council. But I really think Josh didn't do a very good job in this challenge this week. So I'm actually going to give him a thumbs down or a negative for this week. So he's actually now even. He's at a plus and a minus. Next up is going to be Carolyn. Carolyn's actually getting a plus this week. She found the idol. Nobody knows about it. She didn't play it when she could have, when she knew she was probably getting at least 1 vote. So I'm going to give her a plus this week. And I think honestly, I think the reason that she did this, and it did, got the idol, nobody suspected it, blah blah blah. I think all that is the case because she's not that good of a player, and I think everybody knows it. And she's getting the edit of like, oh, I've overcome so much, blah blah blah. And, that's great, and that can be a winner's edit. It's not rare, it's not often that person wins, but I guess it could be. And if it is, I'll be kind of annoyed. Because she's just so weird. You have to have some sort of social grace to win this game, I would think. But she obviously, I think she found the idol, and nobody's really onto her because they don't think she's good enough to do anything with it or to find the idol. So maybe her lack of skill or perceived skill is helping her in this case. Next is Brandon. I'm going to give Brandon a plus this week. He did really, really well in the challenge. He's definitely a challenge monster. This will probably, if he keeps getting pluses, that's great. It'll probably change around the merge, if not before that, because, what's a strength early on becomes a liability, and oftentimes what's a liability early on becomes a strength. So plus for him. So I put him up to 3 pluses. Josh is obviously even. Carolyn is -1 after her 2 negatives last week, and Brandon now 3 pluses this week. 3 pluses after the plus this week. Let's go with Matthew. Matthew had a negative last week. This week I'm giving him a positive. I'm giving him a thumbs up this week. Matthew, I think the reason I'm giving him a thumbs up is he obviously got hurt. He took his, against doctor's advice, took his arm out of the sling to complete the challenge because he really, really knew the challenge, because it's a challenge he's practiced in his backyard. Really good. Also, his explanation for why he didn't vote made a lot of sense, and it worked for him for sure. I don't think, he even said in confessional, it wasn't the truth. He didn't, play a shot in the dark because he was scared, but he played up the fact that he got hurt, and he was scared they were going to vote him out because he got hurt, so he played a shot in the dark, even though he didn't feel like he needed to, and he ultimately didn't need to play it. But he didn't want to vote against Brandon or Maddie. He really just didn't want to vote, so he played a shot in the dark. Wasn't saved by it, but also it allowed him to not have to vote. And some subsequently, kind of the shoulder injury kind of helped him again, like Tyson in season he won. He got hurt, became less of a threat, and and ultimately won the game. In this case, the injury gave Matthew the guise, or the opportunity to play a shot in the dark, because he's quote unquote scared he's going to get voted out for being injured, and that way he doesn't have to vote against anybody and not make any enemies, not show which side which side he's on ultimately. So good on him. He gets a plus. That puts him at even. Sarah obviously had a plus last week. This week she has the 2 negatives for being the lowest player, so she's now at -1, as we already talked about. Next is Carson. We give Carson a plus this week. Not that I don't know if he necessarily made the right move. He's keeping the weirdos around, which is good. It's good to keep the weirdos around for the end game. It's a little too early to do that. It's like Sherry and Shamar from Karamoan. Sherry wants to keep Shamar in the game because Shamar's weird. Nobody likes him, and she can take him to the end and win. But obviously that didn't happen because he was too combustible. I think Carolyn's kind of the same way, but he had enough social capital to go between both alliances. In that case, that's where you want to be, at least for you don't want to be in that spot all the time, because eventually you're going to get probably caught playing both sides. But in this case, it worked out for him, and we'll see how it does next week for him. But for right now, it was a positive. Next is Franny. I gave Franny a positive last week. I'm giving her a thumbs down this week, just because of the showmance. Again, I think she has enough social capital and doing decently well socially in her tribe, and her tribe's winning, so that also helps. But when you're in a showmance, especially out in the open showmance, her own allies like, yeah, you should probably tone it down a little. And that's, a lot coming from your allies. Your allies being that honest and frank with you, not necessarily a good thing in this case, because they're telling her, hey, you're obvious. You're gonna become a threat. You're gonna become a target. That's her allies telling her that. So it's probably out of love, but still, people are noticing it. It's not good. And also, 95% of the time in the showmance, the woman is the one who gets picked off. Right? There's a man, two couple. There's a man and a woman who are enjoying a showmance. Usually, it's the woman who fares worse. So we'll see. I give her a thumbs down though for that reason. So she's even now. Next, it's Kane. I'm giving him another thumbs down. His second one, so he's 2 under, 2 negative. And I'm giving him that one because unlike Matthew, whose explanation for why he voted the way he did or didn't vote in this case, he did a really good job with it. Kane just kind of came back to, I wasn't sure which way to go, and sorry about that. That was pretty much his answer. And Brandon's like, okay, cool, I'll keep that in mind. And Brandon handled it pretty well, and that's kind of why I gave Brandon a thumbs up too, because he handled it pretty well. He didn't really come out blowing up anybody, which, is a really bad way to play. And obviously, it's, it is what it is. You don't want to do that. You don't want to come blowing up, on people and being really a jerk about it. So Brandon didn't do that. So that's why he got the plus. But Kane didn't handle it well either. He could have said, "Hey, I thought Maddie said that, she wanted to flush your idol and blah blah blah." And he could. I mean, it was kind of a tough spot because nobody else voted. Like if the whole tribe voted that way, he could have been like, whatever. He said I was just going along with it, whatever. But only 2 people voted for Brandon, one of which got voted out. And Brandon, they had enough votes to get rid of Brandon. So, Kane was in kind of a tough spot. I think he could have handled it better, but, not really much room to move. So I have to give him a thumbs down in that case for that. Next is Lauren. I'm going to give her a plus this week because even though she kind of got outed and caught a little bit, but with her, the fact that she had the vote bank and didn't show anything, any paperwork or anything to prove anything, I like the fact that, she said, hey, she came back to, she was very honest, hey, I banked my vote, so that's why I didn't vote. And that helped her maybe a little bit too with Brandon. We really didn't see much of the fallout from that. I mean, we did a little bit, but not like Brandon saying, hey, I don't trust these people or whatever. We didn't really see any of that, so it's hard to see it from Brandon's perspective and, therefore Lauren. But it seemed like things went okay for her. She didn't, have to create enemies or anything like that. So I think she's in a decent spot based on that. Next, I have Claire. I'm giving a +2, a thumbs up 2. Again, I don't think anything too outrageous, but she defined the challenge. Seems to be a decent leader on that tribe, and I think she's doing pretty well overall in the game. Not a ton to base that off of, but I think she's doing pretty well. So she got 2 pluses now. Next, I'm gonna give Matt B. I'm gonna give him another thumbs down again. The showmance is really bad. You don't want to get involved in that. And again, he doesn't even have a ton of allies other than just his showmance partner, which isn't good. And he's putting himself in a rough spot. Heidi, I'm giving her another negative. Again, I think I mixed her and Jamie up last time. So sorry about that. Heidi, I don't really know who she is. She's not really on the screen, so I have to give her a negative. She hasn't done much. She hasn't done anything yet. And obviously the winner can still be, you can be purple the first 2 weeks and still win, but not looking good in that case. So I'm gonna give her a thumbs down. But I think she seems to be getting in a decent alliance in a good group. So that's positive at least. Danny giving him a plus just for finding the idol. So he was negative, now he's positive, or now he's even, I should say. So he found the idol, so I'm giving him props for that. And then finally, Jamie, again, played the shot in the dark, didn't need to, and explained it just like I was freaking out, so I played it, and it's bad gameplay, and you don't want, it's, in some cases, punting is good, to save yourself from looking like a fool and having your game blow up in your face. So for Matthew, I think it was good, but for Jamie, she had no real reason to play it. And if I'm Brandon, I'm like, well, I don't trust her now because she doesn't seem stable, right? So I think that's kind of how I see that with Jamie. Other than that, one more. Let's go ahead and move to the player of the week this week. And there's one person I didn't mention on this list. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about Jam Jam. Jam Jam did a good job this week. I don't know if he's, I'm not going to say it was the greatest game ever played or best week ever played, but he wasn't sure which way he wanted to go. He ended up going the right way. He ended up, doing things the way he wanted to. The vote went the way he wanted it to go. He spearheaded it, and then he pulled in Carson. So, I think it's a good move. I check that. I don't know if it's a good move, but he wanted it to vote a certain way. He's closer with Carolyn than the other ones, which makes sense. Age wise and personality wise, everything like that, they're closer in all those things. So he wanted to keep Carolyn. And it'd be interesting to see if they all voted for Carolyn, and he told her to play idol, or he didn't tell her to play idol. She could vote out with it or whatever. It would be interesting to see what he did if there's 3 votes on Carolyn. If he would have let her go, or if he would have tried to save her or whatever. But in this case, he didn't need to, because ultimately it was only 3 votes to 1 because Sarah couldn't vote, and he brought Carson over. So he basically was kind of on the bottom of one alliance, flipped over to become the middle of another alliance, which is fine. So I think he did a good job, and he's the player of the week this week. So he gets 2 pluses, which actually ties him now with Brandon with 3 pluses total. 3 thumbs up for Yam Yam for this season so far. Jam Jam. So, other than that, that's all I have for this week. It was a fine week. Wasn't too exciting. It was kind of a run-of-the-mill episode. But we'll be back here shortly for the next one. So be sure to subscribe to anything. You can like our Facebook page, Pavement Road Prod on Facebook. You can email the show directly, pavementroadproductions@gmail.com. Subscribe, share the post, tell your friends. And we'll be back here, like I said, in a couple days for the next episode, the episode 3 of the season. I think Jessica will be back for that one as well. She's been watching as well, but obviously we haven't been able to get our recording schedule to sync up based on the fact that we're behind. So hopefully she can be with us next week. Until that, that's all I have for you right now. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing and sharing the post. And until next time, I got nothing else for you, because the tribe has spoken.